As the Blue Hen flies, less than 150 miles separate Happy Valley and Newark, Delaware. But for the first time, Delaware and Penn State meet on the gridiron. Penn State is 1-0 off last week's season-opening win. We'll look back at the good, the bad, and of course, the ugly. Plus, we'll look across the NFL and set the stage for Week 1 in the pros as more than 30 former Nittany Lions take the field. And Executive Chief Nitwit Neil Riddell is with us to talk about this matchup and weigh in on whether or not he feels differently about the Nittany Lions after one game. The 1-0 mentality rolls on Saturday in-state college. Penn State hosts Delaware. We have your preview ahead. Nittany Nation Game Day starts now.
To it. Yeah, the money is talking, I'm flowing, it's coming in just how I drew it. Yeah, you know what it is. Hey, we doing it big. Look up, there is no limit, no, we cannot settle for this. Yeah, can't stop, nah, won't stop. Yeah, spin on live, you don't believe it, just watch.
And welcome into another episode of Nittany Nation Game Day. I'm Andrew Clay. Ryan Risky, my, left-hand man, right hand on your TV screen, but I digress. It's Penn State and Delaware in Happy Valley, a noon kickoff. And Ryan, this is one of those FCS matchups, kind of hard to get too amped up about.
This isn't one that you mark on the calendar when the schedule
not.
comes out, ever.
Penn State doesn't play many of these games. Really just the second in the James Franklin era. Penn State beat Villanova 38-17 back in 2021. Of course, the Nittany Lions come off a 38-15 win over West Virginia last week in the helmet stripe game. Drew Aller was stellar in his first career start, throwing for 300-plus yards and 3 touchdowns. We'll touch more on that coming up later in the show. But Ryan, call me a pessimist. I want to talk about the bad from last week. Penn State does have some things to clean up.
Yeah, special teams, not the best. It wasn't perfect, except week one's never perfect for anybody. There are concerns about Penn State's run defense. West Virginia ran for 146 yards and 2 scores. But that was more about a scrambling quarterback and less to do with punching Penn State in the mouth. Starting running back C.J. Donaldson rushed for just 81 yards on 18 carries. Still, there are a lot of fans that want to see the run defense improve, and Coach Franklin says he expects marked improvement.
That's what the best programs do. And I think the best programs improve and learn and make corrections after wins. They don't have to have setbacks, wake-up calls to be able to do it. Now that's easier said than done.
Besides the run, the lack of tight end involvement was probably more surprising than alarming, actually. Tyler Warren had just 1 catch for 7 yards. The game plan seemingly just didn't go that way, but the real concern, the ugly, was the kicking game. This is a token red flag for sure. Starting kicker Sander Sahadak missed both field goal attempts that he had.
And both were close attempts. They weren't long.
They were, and he was benched in the second half for Alex Felkins, who connected on all 3 extra points and his lone field goal attempt. But that was just 25 yards.
Yeah, Sahadak's struggle is drawing comparison to Sam Finken's struggles early in his Penn State career. He notably struggled as a freshman, missing 4 field goals in a loss to Virginia back in 2012. Coach Franklin wouldn't tip his hand on who would start against Delaware, but he threw support behind Sahadak, who the coach said went out of his way to address the team this week.
I usually end practice and I say something. He said, "Coach, I got something to say," and got up and just handled himself really well. I was really proud of him as a young man. Like if it was my son, very proud of him. As a member of this team, as a teammate, I just thought he conducted himself really well. I think he's earned everybody's respect, but I thought what he did right there and what he said did it even more.
Well, if you're looking for this game on TV, you're out of luck. Remember, it only streams on Peacock this week. Don't shoot the messenger, though.
Please.
Other Nittany notes this week, we learned that Abdul Carter was charged with possession of marijuana back in August, and Carl Nassib retired from the NFL this week. The former Nittany Lion became the first openly gay player in the league back in 2021. He spent 7 seasons between the Browns, Bucks, and Raiders.
Well, don't forget, after the game, catch Nittany Nation Overtime. It airs each Sunday on WTAJ and Altoona State College, but drops Monday on Nittany Nation podcast channel on Apple and Spotify. This past week, we had Bill Kontz on the show. He was part of the 1982 championship team. We asked him if this team could join those ranks. He said, not quite yet.
The schedule works in their favor much more in 2024 than they do this year. Michigan drops off the schedule. We get Southern Cal and Ohio State at home. Alar will be a year more seasoned. The running backs will be a year older. The wide receivers, that whole thing. As much as I'd like to think they'll vie for a spot in the college football playoff when it expands to 12 teams, I think we have a much better chance of being part of that in 2024 versus this year.
It is break time here on Nittany Nation Game Day. When we come back, we'll circle around the NFL and lay the landscape of the Nittany Lions playing in the pros.
But first, the Penn State wide receiver who caught a lot off guard by shining on Saturday, what he said about his first game in the blue and white. That's when Nittany Nation Game Day returns.
You're watching Nittany Nation Game Day.
Those guys get limited amount of reps. They should have a chance to compete. And I believe that not just from a Penn State perspective. If we're ever in that situation, I see it the same way. This isn't me looking at it just from our view. I got a bunch of other things I could say, but I'm just going to leave it at that.
James Franklin responding on Tuesday to West Virginia head coach Neil Brown's criticism of Penn State's late score Saturday. As you heard, Franklin defended the team's backups getting the opportunity to go out and play and score a touchdown. Ryan, this has been a talk really since last Saturday night. What's your take on this?
Cry me a river, Neil Brown. Like, seriously. He left his starters in the whole game, scored a touchdown late, then went for a 2-point conversion and copied the Chiefs' shovel pass to the tight end from the 2-yard line. Like, as Franklin said, these guys deserve the opportunity to compete, and also it was nice to see Bo Pribula lead that touchdown drive and get that in-game experience, because you never know what'll happen. Like, Drew Aller could get injured, and you want him to have as much experience going in there as possible. And he did it against, a team's first-string defense against an FBS opponent.
And what we did include there is Coach Franklin also said if he'd have left the starters in there, he would have taken the knee. But it was backups in, and he wanted to give them an opportunity. Let's move on and talk about the good, though, from Saturday's game. And while a lot of people talked about Dante Cephas' potential impact, he wasn't the transfer who stepped up.
No, it was Florida State transfer Malik McClain, and he had a really strong debut, catching 4 passes for 58 yards and a touchdown in the win. McClain came to campus back in the spring after leaving Florida State. Penn State was in his final 3 coming out of high school, but he chose to stay closer to home initially. Coach Franklin says that his impact reaches off the field, as he calls him a great fit for the program.
The guy has got a smile on his face all the time. I mean, literally all the time, in the weight room, walking around campus, going to class. He's been a really nice addition and has done a really good job, not just from a production standpoint, but from a cultural standpoint. He's been great.
We're a tight family. Everybody's making plays all the time, so it's like, it's fun. It's like you get hype. You see somebody else make a play, just make you want to make one too.
McClain caught 1 of 3 Drew Aller touchdowns in the win as the sophomore quarterback threw for 300 yards and 3 scores. He was named the Big Ten's Offensive Player of the Week. Aller, who was making his first start, was impressive, but perhaps his decision-making is what took the cake. Coach Franklin lauding the team's poise and patience in the pocket.
When you're not poised, you have a tendency to jump over reads and skip over progressions because your feet are antsy or because your eyes are antsy. And he's just so calm and poised that allows him to go through progressions and read defenders.
If you're up in a 1-score game and the clock's winding down, you don't want to force anything that could possibly lead to a turnover and turn the game and flip the game over. So I think it's just all in, assessing it pre-snap and knowing just knowing what you can and can't do in certain situations.
There's 325 yards in his first start, was the second most for a Nittany Lion in their first start. In 2003, Michael Robinson threw for 379 yards and 2 scores in a road loss in Madison. The NFL season gets underway this week, and there are more than 30 Nittany Lions on active rosters. Let's go across the league, take a look how the Nittany Lions stack up in 2023. Malik McLean hasn't been in Happy Valley very long, but he very much knows what being a Penn State receiver means.
There's like an NFL status here now for receiver, so all you have to do is put that work in, and anybody can be that.
McLean hopes to follow in the footsteps of what's been an NFL pipeline in recent years. Of the 33 Nittany Lions on active rosters, 5 are receivers, 3 are tight ends. All are itching to play a game that actually matters.
I'm excited, man. I'm super ready. It's what we've been working for all training camp.
I think we have a lot to prove, and I think that we're excited for the opportunity.
In April, 6 Nittany Lions were drafted. All 6 made it to week 1, though Juice Scruggs is on IL. 2 other undrafted free agents also made the final 53-man cut earlier this month, including Mitch Tinsley, who said that was a day he'll never forget.
It's always been my dream, honestly. Growing up, I always envisioned myself being, in this position. It wasn't how I envisioned it, but it's everything I thought it would be.
Well, big names like Saquon Barkley and Michael Parsons are back with New York and Dallas, respectively. There was plenty of shuffling among the Penn State ranks. Allen Robinson is in Pittsburgh. Mike Gesicki is in New England. Miles Sanders is now a Panther. Still, they're all living their NFL dream, and their former teammates take notice.
I was seeing, Joey Porter's, Jair Brent, like all the guys. Brent, we got the names, sitting here, a bunch of names. And even, Jaquan Brisker, I got to know him over the spring. It feels great watching them, how we all dream to be. And there was guys that was just in here with us, sweating with us and blood and tears with us, living the dream of all of us. And it just puts a smile on your face seeing them fulfill their dreams.
Well, coming up later in the show, a brief history lesson involving Penn State football and a colossal upset from 1983. Plus, Neil Riddell joins me to talk about the game and breaks down the wins and losses of Week 1's victory over West Virginia. Don't go anywhere. Nittany Nation Game Day returns after the break.
Well, hey there, meteorologist Christopher Nallen here with your pregame tailgate forecast. And of course, the game is going to be an early one, so the chance for an early start, I can guarantee you that for those tailgaters. But temperatures will be in the middle 60s at 7 a.m. with a shower possible. And then at 10 a.m., we're going to be seeing some spotty showers around town. So keep in mind at the stadium, you could dodge a few showers, especially at 12 p.m. kickoff time. Lots of clouds, a shower or two. Otherwise, it's dry in the mid-70s. Make it a good one and enjoy the game.
You're watching Nittany Nation Game Day.
Well, back here on Nittany Nation Game Day, Neil Riddell joining us now in studio. You know him as the Chief Nitwit. I know him as an endless knowledge on Penn State football. Neil, you've seen a lot of these Penn State FCS games over the years. How do you feel about these matchups?
Well, I'm not overly excited, Andrew. I mean, I just think, and this was probably going to continue with the college football playoff expanding to 12 teams, I think, and James said this at the beginning, he thinks the whole Big Ten shouldn't do anything to jeopardize getting as many teams in the playoff as possible. And I kind of read that as no Pitt, no West Virginia, certainly no Auburn. So I think you're going to see a steady diet, more of some FCS games, maybe the MAC. And I think some of it's going to depend on how many conference games the Big Ten eventually decides upon.
Do you think moving to some sort of mathematical equation system like the BCS was to maybe fill in those at-large bids, do you think that would change the way they would schedule if you got more points for a weighted opponent like an Auburn, a West Virginia, Syracuse?
A strength of schedule component?
Yes.
I think that would be exciting. I mean, I look back at, to me, the greatest era, or one of them, certainly of Penn State football, is in the early 80s when they were still an independent and they were playing Miami and Alabama and Notre Dame, and the East was great. So, but I think that's yet to be determined.
What are your expectations for Penn State this week?
Well, I think that the fact that they didn't play all that great against West Virginia will serve to, I don't want to say motivate them, but just turn up the urgency to fix their kicking game, be better against the run, start faster. I think protect Aller a little better. He made some terrific plays, but he was also forced to move around in the pocket. So I think addressing some of the leaks that sprung against West Virginia.
It is safe to expect a lot of guys to get in this week, guys we didn't see last week. Is there anyone in particular you're looking forward to seeing play at all, or just more than we saw last week?
Yeah, I mean, Amari Evans, I think, would be a candidate there. If he plays, he was questionable and they're disclosing their injury report or their availability report 2 hours before the game. So that surfaced, and I don't know whether some of the guys on the defensive line, I'd like to see, and this would be a good week to maybe work them back in before you have to start the Big Ten.
I'd like to see more Trey Potts. We saw him a little bit late last week. It'd be nice to see a little more Trey Potts get in the game again. We were talking with Neil Riddell, the Altoona Mirror, and Nittany Nation overtime. There are always a few things to clean up after week one. Besides the kicking game, which is obvious, a big problem, what else do you want to see cleaned up?
Well, I would say defensively, they didn't create any turnovers early in the game. West Virginia, I was kind of surprised how effectively West Virginia ran the ball. I think their backs are good, but this is supposed to be one of the great defenses in the country, we're told. So I think starting faster on defense, I think, will be priority. And just some of the, not just the field goal kicking, but the precision in the kicking game. That was their only penalty. They had a short punt. We want to see more from Riley Thompson, the punter.
Who surprised you the most in week one?
I would say Trey Wallace. I mean, the fact that they went to him, he had 7 catches. We kind of knew that Keandre Lambert-Smith was the big play guy. He's had 2 100-yard games in a row, big plays, going back to the Rose Bowl. I think, and also the fact that they didn't get the tight ends involved almost at all surprised me. I thought because Aller is a young quarterback that they'd be really trying to get the ball out of his hands fast, and I thought that meant the tight ends, but it didn't.
One final question before I let you go. Did you see anything against West Virginia that changed your perception of this team and expectations?
I don't think so. I mean, the fact that they left a lot of points on the field, really, if they make the field goals, they kind of, I mean, they really should have had, at least 40, 45 points earlier than they, not to, in the last 6 seconds to get there. So, I think it was they were never in doubt, and it was a quality first game opponent. So, no, I'm still high on this team, and I think their best days are still ahead of it.
I think we're going to look at West Virginia in this game a little differently at the end of the season. I think West Virginia proved it is a better team than it certainly was last year. And we're going to feel differently here at the end of the season. He is Neil Riddell, the Altoona Mirror, Nittany Nation, Overtime, the Nitwits, all of the above. Neil, appreciate you coming on.
Thanks, Andrew.
When we come back, Ryan is back on set as we wrap up the show. You're watching Nittany Nation Game Day.
Watch Nittany Nation Game Day on these great stations every week. WFXP in Erie, WHTM in Harrisburg, WPHL in Philadelphia, WYOU in Wilkes-Barre, DC News Now in Washington, and WTAJ in Altoona. You're watching Nittany Nation Game Day.
Few years, there's a stunning FCS upset, and Penn State was on the losing end of one back in 1983 when the Nittany Lions lost to Cincinnati. But in their most recent FCS matchup, it was pretty much business as usual in a 38-17 win over Villanova in 2021. The only other time a James Franklin Penn State squad played an FCS school. Sean Clifford threw for a career high 401 yards and 4 touchdowns in that win. I can't see an upset coming this week with Delaware here, but stranger things have happened, right, Michigan? Anyways, let's put a bow on this.
You couldn't resist, could you?
Could not. Let's put a bow on this show with our 3 of you. Ryan, give me your player to watch.
I'm going to go with Chop Robinson. Penn State had some trouble getting to the quarterback last week, and the front seven is going to be anxious to penetrate the line of scrimmage and bring the QB down.
How about a key to the game?
Penn State needs to get as many guys in as possible in what should be a blowout. it'd be nice to see the 2 and 3s get plenty of action in what may be their only other chance this season.
I'll do the bold prediction here. Penn State gets a 50-burger. As you said, blowout on the way. Penn State goes up big and wins big. And with that, we have reached the end of our road. Penn State and Delaware kick off at noon. We'll have a full breakdown on Nittany Nation overtime. Be back here next week to get you set for Penn State's road opener at Illinois. For Ryan Riskey, I'm Andrew Clay. Thanks for watching.